Oh, hey Candeo kids. It's Mr. Drew back again to learn about God in your living room. Hey, one of the best things that I've found during this time that we get to spend a lot of time at home is being able to read some awesome books. This is the one I'm reading right now, but I would love to hear your favorite books that you might be reading right now with a lot more time at your homes. So what I want you to do is, if you have a great book, put it in the comment section below this video. I'm taking suggestions for what to read after this one, so I'd love to hear what you're reading. But you know what time it is right now. It's time to get your brain juices flowing. So what we're gonna do is stand up in front of your TV. And today, we're gonna be working on our balance, okay? So take one leg and stand on one foot, just like that. Lot of balance. Make sure that you're not teetering or tottering to one side or the other. Now, start hopping on that one foot as best as you can. Don't trip, don't fall. Okay, now stand. Now take the other one. Balance on that other leg, okay? Put your arms up like this. It might help your balance. And start hopping up and down on that leg. There you go, there you go. Get that balance and stop. Now, I want you to reach up and touch the sky as high as you can. Get a good stretch. And now go low and touch the ground. Good job. We're getting the brain juices flowing this morning. And up. Now, deep breath. And sit on down. So if you're anything like me, sometimes when I'm going through a story or reading a book, it's helpful to review where we've been so that what we're about to learn makes more sense. So today, we're gonna do a crash course through Genesis, all right? And I need you to help. So we're going to review where we've been and where we're going, because today is the last day that we are going to be in the book of Genesis, all right? So pay close attention and help me out when I ask for it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Good job. And on that earth, God put plants and animals and birds, and He also put a man and a woman. Now, do you remember what the names of the first man and woman that God created were? Yes, Adam and Eve. Now, Adam and Eve lived in the garden that God had made them, but one day, a tricky serpent tricked Adam and Eve to disobey God. Do you remember what the consequence was for Adam and Eve disobeying God? That's right. They were separated from God, and Adam and Eve were forced out of the garden. After Adam and Eve were sent away, their family couldn't stop disobeying God either. Things were getting out of control. So God told a man named Noah to build something. Do you remember what God told Noah to build? Yep, you got it. It's an ark. God sent a flood on the whole earth because of how evil and disobedient humans had become. But He saved Noah and his family and then made a promise to him. Do you remember what promise God made to Noah? Yes. God promised to never send a flood on the earth ever again. But guess what? Noah's family had a hard time obeying God too. It seems like humans can never get it right. So God took things into His own hands. He chose a man named Abraham. And He said that through Abraham's family, all the families of the entire world would be blessed. And Abraham trusted God that He would do exactly what He said. God told Abraham that he would have lots of descendants. Do you remember how many family members God told Abraham that he would have? This is a tricky one. God told Abraham that he would have as many family members as the number of stars in the sky, and we can't even count that high. The promise that God gave to Abraham was then passed down to his son Isaac. And Isaac was given a new name by God. Do you remember the new name that God gave Isaac? That's right, it was Israel. Then, last week, Miss Julie and Mr. Scott taught us that Israel had 12 sons. His youngest son's name was Joseph, and Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, which made Joseph's brothers very jealous. Do you remember what Joseph's brothers did to him when they had him alone in the field? Yep, they sold him into slavery in Egypt. But God had other plans for Joseph, and eventually he became one of the most powerful people in all of Egypt. And that's where our story brings us to today. This is the last chapter of Genesis, and I can't wait to see how it ends. Take a look at this video to see our lesson for this week.
A great famine occurred in many countries. Not enough food grew to feed everyone. But in Egypt, Joseph had stored food for 7 years for Pharaoh. Hungry people from all around came to Joseph to buy food. Joseph's father, Jacob, sent his 10 older sons to Egypt to buy food. Jacob kept his youngest son, Benjamin, at home. He didn't want anything to happen to Benjamin. When the 10 brothers arrived in Egypt, they had to talk to Joseph about buying food. They did not know it was Joseph. He was 20 years older than when they had sold him to the traders, and now looked like an Egyptian. Joseph knew who they were. Joseph's brothers had been mean to him and to their father Jacob. Joseph tested them to see whether they had changed. He acted angry. They were afraid of him. "You are spies," Joseph said. "No," they said, "we are brothers. Our youngest brother is at home with our father." Joseph said, "One of you must go home and bring back your youngest brother so that I will know you are telling the truth." Then Joseph put his brothers in the dark prison. After 3 days, he said, "One of you will stay here in prison while the rest of you go home and bring your youngest brother." He kept Simeon in jail. Joseph's brothers said to one another, "We are being punished for what we did to our brother." They did not know that Joseph understood what they were saying. Joseph sent 9 brothers home to bring Benjamin back to Egypt. He also put money in each brother's sack of grain. When they saw the money, they were really afraid. They thought the Egyptians would accuse them of stealing. "What is this that God has done to us?" they said. The brothers began to think about how mean they had been to Joseph and how sad they had made their father Jacob. They were changing to become kinder men. When they returned home, they could not convince Jacob to let Benjamin go. Simeon stayed in jail. Finally, they needed more food. The brothers said, "We can't go to Egypt without Benjamin." So Jacob said, "If you take Benjamin, also take the best gift you can take to the men, and take twice as much money." When they arrived in Egypt, Joseph saw Benjamin. Joseph told his servant to prepare a meal for them. The brothers did not know what to think. They gave him the gift and bowed down before him, just as Joseph had dreamed when he was young. After the dinner, Joseph sent the 11 brothers home with food. Joseph made another test to see what his brothers would do. He made it look as if Benjamin had stolen Joseph's silver cup. The brothers were afraid Benjamin would have to stay in Egypt and be Joseph's servant. They begged Joseph not to keep Benjamin. One brother, Judah, said, "Let me stay and be your servant instead of Benjamin. Our father could not bear to lose him." Joseph could tell that the brothers had changed. He sent his Egyptian servants out of the room and began to cry loudly. His brothers were very frightened. Joseph said, "I am your brother Joseph. You sold me to be a servant in Egypt, but don't worry. It was God's plan to save your lives in the famine. It was not you who sent me here, it was God." Joseph told them to move Jacob's whole family to Egypt, where Joseph could take care of them. Joseph told Pharaoh what had happened. Pharaoh was glad for Joseph. He sent wagons to help them move. He promised them good land to live on. When Jacob heard that his son was alive and a ruler over Egypt, he could not believe it. But when he saw the wagons, Jacob was ready to move. God told Jacob that it was good for him to go to Egypt. His family would grow to become a great nation, and he would see his son, Joseph, again. Joseph's father lived 17 years in Egypt. Before he died, Jacob blessed each of his sons and also Joseph's sons. His family stayed in Egypt for 400 years, as God had said they would. Jesus was a descendant of Jacob. God had saved Jacob's family. Many years later, Jesus would be born into that family. Joseph recognized that though his brothers intended evil, God planned his circumstances for good to establish a remnant of God's people. Genesis 45:7. Likewise, though those who crucified Jesus intended it for evil, God's plan for the sacrifice of his son was for the good of all people. Through Jesus' death on the cross, God again saved a remnant of people.
And that is the end of the book of Genesis. What an end to this story. Here are a few questions that we want you to talk about with your families or whoever is around you right now. The first question is this: did Joseph's brothers recognize him when they came to Egypt? And if they didn't, why didn't they? Here's the next question. How did Joseph treat his brothers when they came to Egypt? Joseph provided for and took care of his brothers when they came to Egypt. Even though they threw him into slavery many years ago, Joseph didn't repay that evil for more evil. The last question is this: how did God change Joseph's brothers' evil plan to become good? Talk about that right now. Joseph's brothers acted in an evil way, But God used it for the good of his family, with Joseph rising into power in Egypt and then providing for his family and his dad Israel at a time of great need. What an awesome story. What a way to end it, right? What people intended to be evil, God used for good. That is such an awesome way to end Genesis. Thank you, Candeo kids, for letting me join you again this week. I'm so excited to be able to keep meeting in your living rooms, learning about God. I have so much fun every week. Have a great week. We love you guys. See you next week.